ship goes down, do not go down with it. There's a man who spends his life trying to make things right. He becomes the peacemaker. When others become chaotic, he absorbs the chaos. When there's tension, he tries to calm it. When there's misunderstanding, he over-explains. When there's pain, he makes the effort to repair it. He becomes so accustomed to carrying the weight of the room that he eventually forgets to ask a question. Who's carrying me? And eventually, something happens that cannot be repaired by his effort. Something breaks. A promise, a bond, a friendship, a kingdom he spent years building. And suddenly he discovers that loyalty was not being measured by how much he was willing to endure. It was being measured by whether the other side was willing to stand beside him when standing beside him became difficult. The ancients understood something about this. They did not consider loyalty merely an emotion. There was a carried meaning of trust, faithfulness, reliability. A man's word was supposed to have weight. If he said he would stand, he stood. If he gave his word became part of his character. But there's an important distinction. Loyalty is not the willingness to be mistreated indefinitely. A man who tolerates everything is not necessarily loyal. Sometimes he's simply forgotten his own worth. The Homeric hero understands that there are moments when the ship has already been lost. And when the ship is gone, you don't spend the rest of your life swimming after the wreckage. You survive, you stand, you begin again. Thumos. This is where thumos becomes important. Thumos, that spirited fire within the soul, is a part of the man that rises and says, this is not acceptable. But the ancient lesson is not to let that fire become vengeance. An undisciplined thumos speaks that this hurt me, so I will hurt them back. A disciplined thumos says, this hurt me, and I will not allow that pain to determine who I become. That's a much harder form of strength. Because when someone mistreats you, the easiest thing in the world is to become bitter. A harder thing is to remain honorable. If you're a person who spent years regulating everyone else's chaos, you may eventually confuse peace with responsibility. You start believing that if something is falling apart, it must be your job to hold it together. It isn't. You are responsible for your character. You are responsible for your word. You are responsible for what you build, but you are not responsible for carrying another person's disorder forever. Odysseus could not control Poseidon. He could not control the gods. He could not control the sea. He could not control what happened around him. His greatness was not that he controlled the storm. It was that the storm did not become his identity. Sometimes the most painful thing isn't what happened. It's that the explanation doesn't make sense. You keep turning it over. You look for the missing piece. You think, if I had done nothing wrong, why did it come to this? If there's nothing to defend, why did I become an enemy? If what I offered mattered, Why is it so easy to discard? And you keep searching for an answer because you believe the right explanation will finally allow you to heal. But sometimes the lack of a logical answer is the answer. Not necessarily an answer about what another person might have done or why they did it. An answer about what the situation itself has become. Sometimes there's simply no longer enough reciprocity, courage, honesty, or loyalty to sustain what you were building. And no amount of analysis can manufacture those things. Then comes the strange part. You look at the place where your future used to be, and there's nothing there. It feels like dark ink spreading across a page, slowly blotting out the world you were building. The plans, the memories, the imagined future. The identity you had constructed around what you thought would remain. And you can do nothing but watch the void occupy the space. But let's take a Platonist perspective. The Platonic soul is not identical with the circumstances surrounding it. The things of this world change. Bodies change, possessions disappear, fortunes reverse, people arrive and depart, entire civilizations rise and vanish. If your identity is built entirely upon what is temporary, then every loss becomes an annihilation. But if the center of your life is placed somewhere deeper, loss becomes transformation. You have not lost your entire existence. You have lost a configuration of that existence, and this distinction could save a man. Here's something that's worth remembering. A bow moves backward before it moves forward. The string is pulled away from its destination. From the perspective of the bow, it looks like regression. But the tension is creating potential. Sometimes, a man reaches a period where everything feels like it's moving backwards. All his plans collapse. His confidence disappears. His familiar world becomes unfamiliar. Who he became through a journey is now dying. He feels displaced. But perhaps the question is not, why am I going backward? Perhaps the question is, what is this tension preparing me to become? The bow can't remain drawn forever. Eventually it must release. And when it does, the distance traveled by the arrow has nothing to do with the direction the string initially moved. But there's another danger. Going back simply because you cannot tolerate the void. A man can return to something that damaged him because the emptiness afterward is frightening. He can take the broken pieces and polish them until the old lie looks like truth once again. He can convince himself that if he explains himself one more time, sacrifices a little more, tolerates a little more, fixes a little more, perhaps everything will become what it was. But sometimes going back does not restore the past. It just polishes the lie until it looks like truth once more. If you try to salvage a ghost, be careful. You may discover that the version of you, of what you were trying to save, disappeared at the very moment you were forced to abandon it. You can't resurrect something by refusing to admit that it died. Theurgy offers us a different way of understanding suffering. The goal isn't to escape every painful experience. It's to transform the soul through it. The old theurgic vision is one of purification and ascent. The things that possess us must gradually lose their power. Perhaps this loss is asking you, what remains when the thing you were building disappears. Who are you when nobody is validating you? Who are you when you cannot repair the situation? Who are you when you can't obtain an explanation? Who are you when loyalty is not returned? That's where the real work begins. You discover whether your center was ever inside yourself, or whether you had secretly placed it in something outside of yourself. I like having a Spartan perspective on this. The answer is simple. Stand. Not because you're unaffected, not because you don't grieve, not because you don't care. Stand because you have duty to your own character. You do not need to make an enemy of the person who wounded you. You do not need revenge. You don't need to prove that you were right. You don't need to convince everyone of what happened. And you certainly do not need to destroy yourself trying to make someone understand your value. Spartan perspective doesn't waste life explaining the shield. He carries it. And this just brings us to loyalty. Be a man whose word means something. Be the person who doesn't abandon others at the first sign of difficulty, who communicates clearly. But understand that loyalty must be an object worthy of loyalty. Your principles, your children, your craft, your home, your gods, your soul, your word, your highest conception of what a man should be. These deserve your allegiance. And when something collapses, do not collapse with it. The world you were building may be gone. The future you imagine may never exist. The ink may continue to spread across the page where you were detailing what is to be. So let it. You're not the page. You're the one who can pick up the pen again. And perhaps that is the most Homeric thing a man can learn. You're not defined by what was done to you. You're defined by what you do with what was done to you. A man can work material. Iron can be forged. Fire can transform. A bow can be drawn backward and still send the arrow forward. And a soul that has been wounded can still become stronger, wiser, more disciplined, and more beautiful than ever before. Grieve what is gone. Don't worship it. Learn what it taught you. Keep what was honorable. Release what was destructive. And then turn your face toward what comes next. The ancients understood something that modern men desperately need to remember. The destruction of what you built is not the destruction of the builder. The ship can sink, the kingdom can fall, the world can change, but the man who mastered his soul can begin again.